Does anyone remember this story arc from the mid-2000s? Sometimes coming across a representation of massage therapy in popular media can be about as rare as coming across a character that shares my first name. I am Kirby Clark Ellis, MMT BCTMB, and this is Pop Culture Fridays. Desperate Housewives was a dramedy mystery series that ran on HBO for 8 seasons from 2004 to 2012. Towards the end of season 4, Carlos Solis is left blinded by an injury sustained during a tornado. Between the season 4 finale and the season 5 premiere, there is a 5-year time jump where all of the sets of main characters are shown to be in vastly different circumstances than we've come to know them over the last 4 years. For Carlos and Gabrielle Solis, this means that they are reduced to a lower middle class financial situation and are surprisingly blessed with not 1, but 2 children. Early on in the new season, we are shown flashbacks to their first pregnancy, where Gabby shares her concerns about their financial situation and their inability to care for a child. Carlos tells his wife that he is considering a job in massage, although he uses the word masseur, because he doesn't have to rely on sight, it's all about the touch. And despite both of their tendencies for jealousy, Gabby concedes it's not the worst idea in the world. And that's true. Massage has historically been a great profession for the blind or visually impaired to be able to support themselves and their families. In fact, during the 1960s, it was a blind man who was one of the first massage therapy school owners in the state of Arkansas, as well as serving on the Arkansas State Board of Masseurs and Masseuses. There were stories of blind students that came before me at my alma mater, Blue Cliff College, and I've even had the pleasure of teaching a blind student last year. In a different episode's cold open, the voiceover narration also uses the word masseur to describe Carlos. We learn that he has gained employment at the local country club, where he has become an expert at making women happy. From scented candles to new age music and apple schnapps, which, if you want my full opinion on massage and alcohol, I've posted it before. Spoiler alert, they don't mix. Carlos is shown to go above and beyond to customize each of his sessions to each individual client. But on one unusual afternoon, Carlos appears to make one client in particular happier than he intended. The client, Virginia, grips the table linens, which in this case you can see are just towels, while her feet spasm and writhe, giving us, the audience, and Carlos the impression that she has experienced an orgasm on the treatment table. I have told you time and again before that arousal can happen with or without sexual attraction to the therapist, and that's true. It's completely natural. But a full-on orgasm just from experiencing first touch, it's a bit of a stretch. The scene jumps to Carlos flipping the table, meaning he's removing the soiled linens, when one of his colleagues, Clay, comes into the room and tells him that his last reservation, meaning appointment, has canceled and offers Carlos a ride home. Carlos confides in Clay, deferring to his 14 years experience as a therapist, asking Clay right out if he's ever accidentally given a client an orgasm. When Clay repeats the question loudly, Carlos urges him to keep his voice down, acknowledging that he could be fired for a situation like this. Carlos insists that all he did was touch this client's back, to which his colleague Clay flippantly remarks, well, some of these old broads, their anatomy droops to places it shouldn't be. But Carlos insists that his sense of touch is just fine and he knows what he's touching. Switching gears, Clay insists, well, maybe she just really liked the massage. You wouldn't believe the moaners that I get on my table. But Carlos insists that this was different, describing her as quivering and being barely able to breathe. To put the question to rest, Clay says that the surefire way to find out is to check Carlos's gratuity from the session. They are both shocked to find $300 left by Virginia. As Clay puts it, that's enough for 2 orgasms. On a different day, Virginia brings Carlos home in her chauffeured car. Gabrielle lets it slip that Virginia is Carlos's favorite client, but then clarifies after Virginia is shown to enjoy that statement that maybe Virginia is actually Gabrielle's favorite client because of that crazy huge tip that she left last time. Virginia tells them that Carlos has helped her back problem unlike any masseur she's ever had before, reporting that she is pain-free for the first time in years. This prompts Gabrielle to brag on Carlos's magic hands, which I've also made a post about before. Gabby claims that Carlos hits the sweet spot every time, which, as a double entendre, makes Carlos very uncomfortable in this situation. As she starts to leave, Virginia asks Carlos to really consider a proposal that she's made to him. For Carlos to accompany her on a trip to Europe as her personal masseur. She explains that she really hates to stop the treatment plan while they've already made some progress now. The details of this proposal include a 2-month commitment from Carlos in exchange for $50,000 each month, leaving Gabrielle all but speechless and very exuberant about this opportunity. This sort of offer is also not uncommon. Country clubs, resorts, even spas will have clients come in and try to convince therapists to become personal masseurs to them. All, of course, with varying degrees of seriousness. That's not something I would ever be comfortable with myself, even for $100,000, but to each their own. After Virginia leaves, Carlos expresses to Gabby his hesitation about taking the opportunity without really getting into details about the alleged orgasm. Later, on a mission to sweet-talk Carlos's boss at the country club into the 2-month leave from work, Gabrielle crosses paths with the therapist from earlier, Clay. In a humorous misunderstanding, Clay lets it slip about the orgasm that happened on the treatment table with Carlos. In a jealous rampage, Gabrielle demands to know if Virginia is at the country club right that moment. But Clay lets her know that she actually has sent a car for Carlos because she prefers having massages at her place. Clay even goes as far to give out Virginia's personal information, namely her address, which is a big no-no. Clients' personal information, like their residential address, should never be shared with a member of the general public. Sneaking past a housekeeper at Virginia's home, Gabrielle finds a massage going on the 2nd floor of Virginia's home. Carlos is shown giving a massage treatment to Virginia's upper shoulders and neck fibers. He also demonstrates good communication skills, checking in about pressure and comfort for Virginia. While most of the dialogue here is played for laughs, nothing is actually sexualized or suggestive. Virginia suddenly gets a crick in her neck. She lifts her head from the table's face cradle and discovers the spying Gabby. Tactfully, Virginia doesn't raise alarm, but simply asks Carlos to leave the room for her to take a business call. When Gabby confronts her about the orgasm that took place earlier, Virginia is mortified, asking Carlos could tell. Gabby threatens to put the kibosh on this Europe expedition. Virginia goes to explain that her husband is gone, she's estranged from her family, and that touch has become really important to her and has helped relieve her back pain. In an honest and beautiful soliloquy, Virginia makes the case that Carlos has healed her and urges Gabby, and in fact manipulates her, into not letting the friendship between her and Carlos be ended. Alright y'all, I hate to do this, but we're going to have to break this one up into 2 parts. So come back for part 2 of this discussion on massage therapy representation in Desperate Housewives. Greetings and welcome back for part 2 of this month's Pop Culture Fridays, massage therapy representation in Desperate Housewives. When we left off in part 1, Virginia was urging Gabby not to ruin the friendship between herself and Gabby's husband, Carlos, her massage therapist. In a rare form of sensibility, Gabby makes the suggestion that the relationship between Virginia and her husband, Carlos, end before it gets any weirder for all parties involved. But Virginia uses Gabby's affinity for travel and couture fashion against her and expertly manipulates Gabby into allowing the therapeutic relationship between herself and Carlos to continue. In a different episode, the Solis family is shown to be enjoying the spoils of Virginia's company. Their daughters enjoy playing in Virginia's backyard, while Gabrielle lounges in the pool with a margarita. But with Virginia being out of earshot, Carlos voices his discomfort in accepting so much generosity from his massage client. As Carlos puts it, it's a bad idea to mix business and pleasure, and that the orgasm fiasco is all the more reason to maintain professional distance from Virginia. But Gabby is clearly enjoying her time and brushes Carlos's comments off, just asking for more margaritas. But Carlos is right. From the very beginning, this therapeutic relationship between Carlos and Virginia has been perverted with countertransference and transference. From both parties, Virginia and the Solises. But Gabrielle's paradise soon turns into a nightmare. Later that evening, Virginia inserts herself into a family movie night with Carlos, Gabrielle, and the girls. Literally crawling into bed with them, leveraging her wealth, and exploiting their sympathies for her loneliness, Virginia begins to manipulate the Solis family. This finally scares Gabby and convinces her that they need to sever their ties with Virginia. But now Carlos doesn't want to walk away from his commitment to the European trip, insisting that the Solises cannot walk away from a $100,000 opportunity. Carlos also says that he warned Gabrielle about blurring the lines between professional and personal relationships. If only he had been able to heed his own warnings. Later on, once Gabby forcefully pushes Virginia away and insults her, Virginia makes a phone call to the president of the country club, claiming that the way that Carlos touched her during her last massage was highly inappropriate, and once again leverages her wealth and influence to say that she trusts that the president of the country club will take care of it. And this does ultimately get Carlos fired from his job, which is an unfortunate reality. When it comes down to accusations of inappropriate behavior, it oftentimes just boils down to a he said, she said situation that is hard to investigate and even harder to prove. Every case of sexual misconduct is going to be handled differently, but it's not uncommon for employers to fire a therapist before investigative determinations or adjudications have been completed. I'm not saying that Carlos didn't make any mistakes. He did definitely overstep some professional boundaries, but he also didn't commit this offense that Virginia accuses him of. Virginia was the one to sexualize the massage therapy relationship. The mistakes that Carlos made of blurring those professional and personal boundaries could have better been handled by blocking him and Virginia from working together at the country club, and some refresher courses on ethics and massage therapy laws instead of terminating his employment. Virginia eventually calms down and recants her story, getting Carlos rehired at the country club. The story between Virginia and the Solises gets more complicated from there, but it doesn't involve massage therapy as much. But what about you? What are some of your favorite or least favorite representations of massage therapy in popular media? Let me know in the comments below.